Welcome everybody. Dzogchen Master in the Godim Chen wrote there's a prayer which is known as the aspiration or the prayer of a primordial Buddha. It's a liturgy that we often recite in my tradition, especially on occasions like when somebody dies. There's a line in that liturgy, one ground. Out of that, there are two paths. Because that there are two fruitions, the scholars can actually spend a lot of time elaborating commentary or exposition on this simple verse, which almost sound like chord language. First, remember, line says one ground. We can interpret that one ground as the ground of a reality, or as the oneness of everything, or prior to the thought, prior to the human consciousness, or prior to the thinking mind. Or we can turn that into something very divine, holy, sacred. We can regard it as some kind of supreme divine that reside underneath everything that exists. Or we can interpret the one ground as just our consciousness. Before consciousness becomes ego, become aware of itself anyway, then it also says, remember, there are two paths. The two paths refer to two different states of the consciousness, your consciousness mainly, which are awareness and unawareness. And many people even don't know that there are two states of consciousness. They're only aware of one state of consciousness, which is unawareness. And this is good news. Even though we may not be residing always in the awareness, at least we got two states of consciousness. It's not really good news if you are only aware of one state of consciousness and that turned out to be unawareness, that turned out to be the dimension of consciousness that you have been loving for a very long time. Sometimes when people start meditating, there are many new discoveries, insight, and epiphany tend to arise. One of them is that they realize that they have been actually lost or living unconsciously under the power of their thought and mind. Perhaps you may have heard about many mystics of the past, either Buddha or someone else, when they have a epiphany or spiritual awakening, and usually their spiritual awakening has actually two components. One is they see there's a divinity, there's this sacredness pervades every being, which is perhaps a very wonderful thing to witness, and perhaps it can be a very source of a joy. Can you imagine how amazing it is? Suddenly you begin to feel that this huge invisible veil left lift up from your consciousness and you see this divinity, this sacredness pervades everywhere and every being, that can perhaps give rise to tremendous sense of joy. Recently, if we don't have to go back to even Buddha, that is a little bit too far away, but let's think about American mystics. There have been many mystics in this country. It's not about always gun and beer and hamburgers. Indeed, this country actually produced some of the greatest thinkers, scientists, artists, as well as also mystics. One of them is obviously Thomas Merton, whose work resonated with me deeply. I fell in love with his work at one point, and then at some point, friends of mine invited me to visit the city of Louisville, where Thomas Merton had a very profound mystical experience that happened on the street called the 4th Street. I actually went there and paid visit to that 4th Street, and when there was a pilgrim, perhaps you may have read the very content of Thomas Merton's awakening, but it sounds like that he really began to feel this love towards every human being. He saw this profound, unfathomable sacredness, beauty in every human being underneath our persona, our false appearances. That seems to be one insight that accompanies those spiritual awakening, which we often call enlightenment. And then another insight that comes along with such experience is a little bit humorous, and that is they can't begin to see that we human beings are a little bit immature, or we're kind of a little bit deluded. That's what they see. Maybe they don't say that right away, but that's what they see. They see this whole world is a little bit crazy, and maybe a little bit even similar to a house of the mad or madness. I was visiting very recently Minneapolis in Minnesota. Towards the end of the weekend meditation retreat, we threw this party where I cooked everybody Tibetan food called momo, Tibetan dumpling. We cooked the vegetarian momo. Finally, I figured out how to make really nice, delicious Tibetan dumpling, vegetarian dumpling. I was kind of proud of this new knowledge. I wanted to show that to everybody. A group of volunteers came to the party, and we had a nice gathering and ate the vegetarian momo. And somebody said, I have a gift that means a lot to me. It is a T-shirt that belonged to a friend of mine who passed away. I was kind of curious about what that T-shirt might be. And then she gave that to me. We opened it, and there was this caption on that T-shirt. It said, Earth, the lunatic asylum of the universe. I said, no thank you, because I really didn't want to wear that T-shirt, walk around. You never know what kind of response you'll draw. You know, you can really draw some violent and aggressive, unkind response from other people, because what you are saying is not that flattering to the humanity. Basically, this T-shirt is saying that, the caption is saying that we are all a little bit little bit cuckoo, can I say that? And that's okay too. But also, it's, I think, very liberating to realize that we have been kind of lost and been living literally unconsciously in terms of and that we have been ruled by our own thoughts and feelings, sensations, as well as our concepts, ideas, and we kind of began to see that we didn't actually live out of awareness, out of intelligence, out of love, courage, but we live it as a being, unconscious being, somehow or another, who was basically enslaved by one's own mind, and not talking about karmic factors. There are a lot of karmic factors that we are dealing with, and some of these are very old and ancient. I remember when Buddha had an awakening, he had this powerful journey to the past, where he connected the very source of his own karmic formations. I think he remembered something like 500 lifetimes. Basically felt he is connected with all these beings. The point I'm trying to make is that there are all these very old, unpurified karmic factors, karmic baggage that we're all carrying. And our mind, our heart are very much ruled by those karmic baggage. And this karmic baggage are not something that we even created or we chose to harbor. Instead, it comes at the moment that you are incarnated as a human being. It's kind of package deal being a human. Does this make sense? It's a package deal that we really couldn't refuse. The moment we began to manifest as a human being, who knows, maybe it's all, of course, hard to describe, but maybe our spirit, our consciousness want to manifest into this human realm, because we realize that there are actually lots of fun things we can do. This human world is really fun. We can, whatever, fall in love, we can, whatever, enjoy this whole area of human delight. It's very amazing to be a human being. It's fun to be in the world, and especially some of the spirits thought it's really good time to be reincarnated because there's Netflix right now. Among all the possible locations that you can reincarnate, they really thought some of these smart, savvy spirits who are just roaming throughout the universe last few centuries and not finding any kind of desirable location or world to be reincarnated. But they saw the Netflix is there, and without any doubt they decided to manifest. But maybe we have also forgotten that it's not a purely convenient manifestation to be human being. There's karmic baggage that comes with us the moment you are born. Our own karmic baggage, the karmic baggage of our ancestors, our parents, and their parents, and so forth. I even find that there are cultural karmic baggage that we have to experience and we have to go through the moment you are born in certain location in this world or certain place in this world or to a certain family, until we go through authentic spiritual practice, process of purification. And therefore, I think even in this country, there are a lot of karmic baggage that we all go through. And there's a lot of violence in this country that you are witnessing right now. And it's not a new thing. The root of all this violence that we are witnessing all the time in the news lies in the history of this country. This country actually started with a lot of violence about conquering this land and also taking forcefully land away from the indigenous people, and there was perhaps lots of conflict between people and community, and so we are actually experiencing lots of violence in this culture, anger, violence, and as a culture, I feel that this whole culture is still going through this very old karmic baggage that people haven't really talked about openly, and as a nation we haven't maybe sat together and openly address these issues, these karmic issues, and to go through some kind of spiritual practice of acknowledgement, healing, reconciliation. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we all are carrying this karmic baggage from the past, and we are kind of ruled by our own karmic baggage. It seems that the unawareness is much stronger than awareness right now, and this has been true all along. It's not some kind of new phenomenon or sign of a Kali Yuga, the Dark Age. The unawareness has been more powerful force than the awareness. And this could change someday in the future as humanity continues to evolve. I hope that we are evolving. I hope we are not devolving. I believe it for a very long time that as a species, we human beings are really evolving very fast. That's a narrative that I told. And I even didn't know the word devolve, but within the last 30 years, somehow this vocabulary started lurking into my consciousness, which is devolve. I started using the word devolve. I hope I'm wrong totally. Devolve, which is the opposite of the evolving. And then, believe it or not, notice that some other people are actually using that word, devolve. And now you hear that we have this concept of devolve. It means that we are not evolving, but actually we are kind of devolving, we are going backward. I hope that's not true. But anyway, it feels that even right now, today, in this world, the awareness is there. Awareness is there, just like flame burning. But unawareness is a much more powerful, the strongest force right now. And therefore it's a difficulty to really wake up in this world, because there's a whole powerful force of unawareness out there, and where we can easily be consumed into it. And even we practice sometimes spirituality or Buddhism, whatever lineage that you associate, whatever practice you do, still the unawareness is very, very powerful. Actually, I was talking with my friend Leonard tonight about it. Before I came here, we didn't plan to talk about it. Accidentally, we ended up talking about the habit of human mind. And the habit of human mind is that even we practice spirituality, and still our habit is so strong, and that we tend to sometimes practice spirituality or even Buddhism, not as a way to wake up, but just another way to perpetuate our unawareness. And therefore, people often becomes very dogmatic, fundamentalist, not in a good way, or becomes very dogmatic, very fanatic, because that's just another way for the ego to perpetuate the unawareness. I even quoted him this very famous analogy mentioned in many scriptures about a monkey who jumps off a branch of tree, but then she immediately jumps on another branch of tree. She never actually let her dance in the sky. She jumped off one branch of the tree, and then immediately she jumps on another new branch of tree. That means she is always attached to something. In the same way, our human mind has this tendency to not wake up and to somehow perpetuate this very old habit, unawareness. Of course, when we don't meditate, when we don't practice self-reflection or spiritual disciplines, but even when we supposedly practicing spiritual disciplines, I think there's a way that we can really perpetuate the unawareness. And this is quite self-evident because there's a report telling that there are around 400 million Buddhists in the world, which is quite a lot. But imagine that 400 million people are practicing awareness every day. This world will be very different than now. So, even though on the report there are supposed to be 400 million Buddhists, by now perhaps the number is increasing. So many people in the Asia, especially in Asia, are actually embracing the Buddhist practice. Like millions, hundreds of millions of people practicing Buddhism, which is a very different development from the West. In the East, now we have, every time when there are meditation retreat or teachings, the problem is that there are so many people that sometimes even these big stadiums are not enough to hold all these people, because hundreds of thousands people want to come to those Buddhist teachings, which is of course quite inspiring. And this is not what is happening in the West. And yet, this is not actually any kind of true indication that all these hundreds and hundreds of millions of people are going to practice true awareness, and then they're going to wake up. And that would be very wonderful, but it's not actually happening. And so what I'm trying to say is that the unawareness is very powerful. And this is where we are in the evolutionary stage. But maybe this will change. Someday there could be time in the human history in the future where awareness is the strongest force and unawareness is the weak force. And where maybe people are living every day with awareness and with much more love and compassion than we're experiencing right now. I always tell this joke. Whenever that happens, of course I may not be here. I would not be in this world. But then my sadhana, my job would be very different. Right now, my job is to go somewhere in this world, either Baton Rouge, which you mentioned, or the city of Seoul in South Korea, which are really different from each other. There's not so much similarity between Baton Rouge and Louisiana versus the capital city of South Korea, totally different. So I go to those very different places that has absolutely contrasting culture, different time zone and food, and also people. In all aspects, they're so different. But what I'm doing is the same sadhana, which is to share the Buddhist teachings and trying to wake people up, including myself, and teach people how to cultivate awareness. This is my job, so I fly every other week and go somewhere and to teach how to meditate, how to cultivate awareness. So my joke is, if awareness becomes the strongest force in this world, most probably I don't have to travel, but then maybe I have to travel, but maybe the nature of all this meditation retreat that I've been leading will be very different. Maybe there will be a point that nobody knows how to be angry and fearful. Then I will be traveling twice every month to teach people how to have a fear, how to be angry, because people are experiencing so much love and kindness. People even don't know, what is anger? I don't know what you're talking about. What is a fear? What is judgment? Can you teach me? I want to try. Because I'm on this journey of experimenting of my consciousness and all this uncharted territory that I really don't know. I want to experience the whole thing. I never know what means fear, angry. Could you teach? So, and then my sadhana will be different. Perhaps I will be traveling and teaching people how to be angry for a while, how to be fearful for a while before it get too much, before you get out of hand. Does this make sense? But that may not happen in my lifetime. It may take a few centuries or maybe even eons, we'll see. I did lots of Buddhist practice as a week introduced. I think one time I have this very interesting experience. I was doing Tara sadhana, Arya Tara sadhana. I still love the Arya Tara sadhana along with the other sadhanas. And I was doing lots of prayers at that time. This was maybe in my teenagerhood. I was a monk when I was a teenager. That's how I complete my teenagerhood as a renunciate as a monk. My main practice was deity yoga. I had all these powerful devotions and relationship towards Tara, Avalokiteshvara, all these sacred expressions. And then one time I have this very interesting experience that I didn't kind of like my mind. I didn't like my mind. Does this make sense? I already received lots of teachings by then, but I didn't really meditate. Yes, I did meditation, but I think I didn't know how to meditate very well. That does not mean I know how to meditate now. Please don't think I'm indicating now I know how to meditate. So when I was a teenager, we did lots of meditation, but I kind of didn't know how to meditate in two sense. I missed some point, whatever that means. Then, but I was very devotion. I had lots of devotion, very powerful devotion towards all these sacred expressions, Tara, Avalokiteshvara, and Grupama Sambhava. And then I also developed this another kind of it's not even awareness, it's kind of conscience through which that I categorize all my experiences every day into the department of wholesome and department of unwholesome. Does this make sense? It's almost like there was kind of holy war began inside me, except I'm fighting with myself. This part of me was very holy, and the part of me wasn't very holy. And then I somehow decided to take on side of the holy version of myself. And I didn't like sometimes the thoughts and the emotions, impulse that pop up in my head, the ones are labeled as unwholesome. And really I was quite proud whenever I experienced this whole host of thoughts, emotions, which I regard as a wholesome, holy. And therefore, this internal battle developed inside me, to the extent that I kind of didn't like my mind. And sometimes I remember I was praying to Tara, please help me, take my mind away if you can. I don't need really my mind. Please take my mind away. Of course, that's impossible. Nobody can take your mind away, even though you pray to the divine, and then nobody will take your mind away. In these days, at least I'm okay with my mind. I don't pray anymore to anybody to take my mind away. The reason I didn't like my mind is that I felt my mind is not holy enough. And also sometimes our mind can cause lots of unnecessary problems like fear, anxiety, and then we really don't want to experience our mind, and we wish that there's some kind of force, some sort of divine force who can just literally take our mind away. In the same way doctors can take a different part of your body completely, or maybe a cancer or tumor. I wish that I prayed, Tara, please take my mind away, please. But I, of course, didn't think about the consequence of losing mind, if anything can happen. So, but I think we all have sometimes a desire for this kind of transcendence where our mind is totally gone. Because if you imagine that if your mind is totally gone, then all your perhaps problems, your fear, your anxiety, your anger will be gone in some sense, at least for a while. I remember a few years ago I was driving with somebody, group of people in Asia, and this lady said that, we start talking about enlightenment, especially the sudden awakening, sudden enlightenment. In some Buddhist tradition, there is this methods they use to introduce a sudden awakening in the consciousness of the meditators. Then this one woman said that she developed her own methods to introduce or to induce sudden enlightenment in her mind. She said she developed that when she was very young because she had a lot of fear and anxiety. Her method turned out to be not a koan or not some kind of koan or spiritual inquiry or mantra. She said, I used to stuff myself with chili sauce. And completely, and I feel all this burning sensation that I lose my mind, I lose my worry, my anxiety, my thinking mind. In some sense, that was my way to experience the satori or whatever, the sudden enlightenment. So either you can pray to Tara. If that doesn't work, just make sure there's a chili sauce around you. Maybe sometimes chili sauce is more powerful than Tara. But now, after meditating, I kind of realized that actually I don't have to reject, I don't have to transcend my mind. I learned how to be with my mind, how to be with my thoughts. Awareness is actually not so much about transcending or totally removing all your ordinary human thoughts from your system, but it is a state of your consciousness where you are experiencing very much the ordinary human thought, emotions, but you are not bound by any of them. That's what really awareness is. And tonight I want to talk about awareness, and that seems to be the very heart of all the Buddhist teachings and practices. And either you do Dzogchen meditation, or Vipassana, or Mahamudra, or Tantric Buddhist sadhanas, these beautiful sadhanas, the heart of all these spiritual practices is really to have awareness. And there are many ways of interpreting what awareness is, because awareness is not just one thing. There are many levels of awareness. And yet, the most practical, the simplest definition of awareness is actually to be in the state of your consciousness, where there's enough insight, and so you are no longer ruled by your thoughts, you're no longer ruled by your experiences, your own karma. And there are different ways of practicing awareness, sometimes through forms such as like a sadhana. I found that practicing sadhana is a very powerful way to experience the awareness. And then there are sometimes certain meditation techniques taught in the Dzogchen tradition that can help you to experience awareness. And sometimes this is very easy to have access to the awareness. Let me talk a few techniques and that you can maybe take with you, or maybe you already know all these techniques. But sadhana is also a very powerful technique. Sadhana is mainly deity yoga and the Tantric Buddhism. And perhaps the Tantric Buddhists are the maybe almost only Buddhists who practice the sadhana. Sadhana often associated with sacred expressions or sacred forms, and such as these forms of Buddhas, Yidams, Ushtan Dakas, and Dakinis. For example, in my community we do a lot of sadhanas, and lately we have been practicing lots of Dakini sadhana. Dakini means the enlightened goddess or something like that. It's not the right translation, but that is the best way I can translate the concepts in Dakini. We have been practicing lots of Dakini sadhana, especially this form of Dakini called Yimka Deshin Gyarmo. And then I also practiced Vajrasattva and Avalokiteshvara. And also many people feel that when they practice sadhana, and then at some point people feel that there's this amazing shift happens in their consciousness. They feel that they go from unawareness into awareness, and also many people feel this. There's this beautiful expression. Sure, many of you have heard. It's called a journeying from being self-centered into other-centered. Isn't this a very lovely word even to recite? Even sometimes I may have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's kind of really nice to say that. Do you feel that? Journeying from being self-centered into other-centered. Isn't that very nice even to say? Even I don't know what it means most of the time. Just saying makes me very happy. So you might like to do that too. It just doesn't really matter whether you know what it means or not. Just say that in front of people, joining from being self-centered and other-centered. And if you can put your hands on your heart, that makes even more sound really lovely and spiritual. At least makes sound very cool. That all matters in the end anyway. People always ask me, could you tell me a little bit about your teacher? I have many amazing Dharma teachers. And one of them is Lama Tsurlo, who was a lifelong hermit, who was the, what we call Terdak, the treasure keeper of a very famous Tibetan in Tibet, Tenni Langpa Abang Tibetan. So anyway, it's hard for me to really talk about some of my amazing Dharma teachers. And they're just amazing, they're extraordinary. They're like bodhisattvas, they're Vajradharas. But if I say that, it sounds like I'm just throwing some, what do you call, cliches. But I want to talk about my teacher, not just by uttering cliches, but something really authentic. And sometimes I say, the only way I can talk about my Dharma teachers like Lama Tsurlo is I only can say he's cool. That's all I can say. That's all I say sometimes. And people really want to hear this mystical life of your teachers, something that is totally mind-blowing. What did your teacher do? Tell us. They always ask me this question in the West, also in Asia too. And this day my response is, he's cool, that's it. So anyway, let me go to the heart of matter. And this experience happens, joining from being self-centered into other-centered. And it's not abstract, even sounds so abstract. One may think, this is just another flowery, abstract, grand, some kind of spiritual concept that we can never experience. It's just another abstract. But really, it turned out that this experience happens quite often, more than we think. This journey, which is indeed the ultimate journey. It's the ultimate pilgrimage, the ultimate journey of consciousness. It's the ultimate transformation, which is, remember, going away from being self-centered into other-centered. For our ordinary egoic mind, it's almost impossible to comprehend such a shift, that there's a state of my conscience where I can be totally other-centered, instead of being self-centered, where I can love others. If not more, I can love myself as everyone as myself. I can love even my enemy as much I can love my beloved ones. For the egoic mind, it's almost an impossible transformation. But then when this opening happens in our consciousness, actually it turned out that we can experience such a shift. We can experience being totally other-centered, which is really what bodhicitta is, the awakened heart in the Mahayana tradition. I found that one of the most effective way to experience that journey is through deity yoga. And the deity yoga, in a simple way, is a practice of sacred attention, because you are constantly paying attention to the sacred form of either Avalokiteshvara or Padmasambhava, which represent that awakened mind, the selfless awakened mind, or the bodhicitta, the enlightened heart, or the primordial mind. So let me tell you some of this really inspiring anecdote that I witnessed from practice in deity yoga. Many of you have been to my talks in the past. You have heard this story. But one time I was teaching this practice, Vajrasattva meditation, at a Zen Buddhist monastery in the mountains in South Korea. A group of monks, nuns, attended our retreat. One of them was an older monk. He turned out to be Bhikshu, fully ordained monk, and he has his own temple. And he participated in our retreat on the Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva is a tantric Buddhist deity that represents our primordial purity, which also has all these visualizations where you visualize Vajrasattva and you feel that this white nectar comes and wash your system, your channels, and cleans all your karmic obscurations. It's a very powerful visualization, and then you concentrate on the form of Vajrasattva, which is in the end is this attention, this sacred concentration on your primordial purity, your primordial goodness. Then this monk, this older monk, asked me to have a meeting with him through the interpreter, which I accepted, and then he wore this fancy monastic robe. It turned out that in Korean Zen Buddhist tradition, the monks wear this ceremonial robe when they feel that they are somehow participating in a very special occasion. And then he said through interpreter that he was abandoned by his biological mother. Then eventually he found Buddhism, he became a monk, and he even meditated 3 or 4 years in the mountains. He became this wonderful, even meditation teacher, and but he never met with his biological mother, grew up as an orphan, and later family adopted him, but he had a lot of anger towards his mother. One time, his biological mother sent him a letter, said, "Please forgive me what I did, can I see you?" He was so furious and he wasn't ready to accept her invitation. He refused to see her. And then many years passed by. Another letter arrived, was from his mother. The letter said that I'm in a hospital and am dying. Could you please come to see me? I want to see your face before I die. And also, I am seeking your forgiveness. And then he thought for a while. He was so angry that he refused the request, and she died. And then now he's tormented both anger and also guilt. Anger towards her rejection, and also now he has this guilt that he couldn't forgive her. He told me during the Vajrasattva, after he has been concentrating on the Vajrasattva with this what we call Thubten, which is a very important part of the Tantric Buddhist practice, means the remembrance of the sacred. The Thubten, the remembrance of sacred, means that whenever we pay attention to those sacred forms, we should not just pay attention to them unconsciously as a just compulsion, but we must remember what these sacred forms represent. That's called Thubten. Thak means sacred, Tan means to remember. And he definitely practiced the Vajrasattva meditation with the complete the remembrance of the sacred, which invoked finally the real Vajrasattva himself, which is this awakened heart. It's has no name, but the bodhicitta, the awakened heart. There's this amazing egoless awareness, and then he even kind of visualized his mother. He doesn't know how she looked like, but he visualized his mother in his mind. And he said, I love you, I forgive you, I love you. And then he said, from that on, his whole being, he felt his whole system, his whole being is transformed, he became a new person. And I kind of noticed something was going on in his consciousness, because he was kind of smiling always and didn't know what was going on. But I noticed that something was happening in his being through the retreat, because he was kind of smiling all the time. And sometimes, these Korean Buddhist monks are a little bit, I can't say, but they're not too smiley all the time. And then, to shorten this talk, and then other time the shift going from unawareness into awareness can happen really, really fast. And that's why there's this expression used in many Tibetan tradition. It goes something like this. If you translate, it is essence. If you sit in the right posture, then the supreme realization will arise on its own, which means that sometimes the meditative posture is really important, including the mudras. It feels this is a very funny topic, because when I look around, it feels there's so many well-seasoned meditators. I'm talking about meditation posture. But maybe some of you haven't heard meditation posture, this kind of meditation practice. But in the Tibetan Buddhism, there are many meditation postures which associated with the mudras. Mudra means sacred gesture. For example, when you look at the image of Longchenpa, who is the most important Dzogchen master, he sat in a posture with the mudra known as the Semyen-Lasu Shakya, means mudra of resting in the nature of mind, in which that he simply resting hands on knees. It's very simple mudra. And turned out that this is even though simple, the most profound, the sacredest mudra that you can actually perform. Just resting in the nature of mind. And usually, whenever we hold those mudras, we also remind ourselves. We give this kind of almost a reminder to our mind, say, now I'm resting in the nature of mind. And therefore, when you sometimes just simply rest and maybe you can even join your hands together, or you can sit in cross-legged posture. And if you just rest your hands with this intention, the intention, that conscious intention is very important, intention to rest in the nature of mind. Before you know, maybe you're already now shifted from unawareness into awareness, where you feel now you are this awareness, this mountain-like awareness, and where you are experiencing thoughts, emotions, but you feel you are much bigger than any of them. You feel there's an awareness that is much bigger than any of them. You feel that your awareness is a sky, and all your experience, that might be thought, that might be ordinary emotions, are like clouds. And feel that you are no longer the clouds, you're no longer ruled by or bound by your experience, but you are now this awareness, the sky-like awareness. Before we end this talk, I would like to share a secret. Perhaps many people are interested in learning the secret of awakening. Can I share that with you? Yeah, usually people are very fascinated with the idea of a secret. But some secret are not so secret once you figure out what it is. I remember there was this TV commercial many years ago about this young monk somewhere in the Himalayan mountains, meditated for years, and he come down, and then he had this meeting with his grand master, and master said, after meditating all those years in the mountains, what did you discover? The young monk said, I discovered that the Remax sells more house than any other real estate company. That's secret, but not too profound. And maybe this secret is going to be pretty ordinary, just like that one. Whenever you mention the word secret, usually everybody's attention is there completely. Oh, secret. There are all kinds of secret of this and that. The secret is such a big deal in my culture that there are lots of stories that every Dharma teacher have their own kind of secret awakening, and even the Thangka painters and the Sameth and even maybe yak herders, they have their own secret how to do. And they say usually they share with their loved ones, their whatever cousins, nieces, and they don't share that with anybody. So I'm going to share tonight with all of you the secret of awakening, secret of enlightenment. And please be ready. Open your notebook. We don't know how long we are going to stuck here tonight. A few hours, or could be just a few minutes. But just please be ready. And I may never share that with anybody again, because partly you are the lucky ones. To me, the secret of awakening is utterly simple. So simple that you'll be disappointed once I tell you what it is. Maybe I should keep that to tomorrow. So anyway, the secret of awakening is utterly simple. It's something that has to do with really heart. And in the end, it's all about devotion. And by the way, before I came here, we talked about the devotion. And devotion really plays a very important role in your own awakening, your own enlightenment. And of course, we can use our mind, this amazing mind, this intellect, which is a very powerful device. We can learn, we can study, we can meditate, we can exert a lot of effort, but if this secret is missed, then, and sometimes our whole effort would not work, would not result in any kind of authentic transformation. And devotion is some kind of longing of your heart. In my tradition, before they give you higher or advanced practices, they ask you to go through this whole process, this whole preparatory practice where you are actually, you develop how to open heart, you develop how to have longing. And in my tradition, my teachers taught us how to have this really yearning, this devotion, almost like undone, like this dying devotion to wake up, and devotion to the awakening, and learn how to have this amazing love, in this case, love of the awareness, love to wake up, love of awareness. And therefore, what we really might like to do is to go inside and to just cultivate this love of awareness, to the extent that you have to be almost kind of obsessed with the awakening. You have to obsessed with the awareness. And in the Buddhist tradition, they use tricks because it's really hard to fall in love with the awareness. Because awareness this is so ordinary. It's very difficult to fall in love with awareness. So they use this method. They use method like deity yoga. It's very easy to fall in love with the deities, as you know. Because you can fall in love with the Avalokiteshvara, you can fall in love with the Zendad deity. That's why called Yidam. Name in Tibetan deities are called Yidam. Tam is a Tibetan word that has etymology. Yid means mind, tam means holding tightly. Means somebody that you think all the time, somebody in whom you're in love with. One time, Lama Tsurlo, you mentioned, he passed away 4 or 5 years ago. He's a yogi, he's a Ngakpa from the Repkon lineage, and we were sitting somewhere together. He was presiding this retreat. He was very amazing Dharma teacher. And he said, I got a telephone call from my Yidam, so I have to excuse the ceremony. I said, what, really? He can get telephone call from Yidams, from like Pama Sambhava or Tara? What he's talking about? It turned out that his wife was calling him from North Exchange. So it can't make sense metaphorically. So you can fall in love with Pama Sambhava or Avalokiteshvara, but in the end, who's Pama Sambhava anyway? Who's Avalokiteshvara? Who's the Tara? Actually, it's none other than your own awareness. You are pure, you are egoless, you are undiluted awareness, which is always accessible. And at some point, we have to generate this kind of longing to wake up. People say, I've been practicing meditation and Buddhism for a long time, but I'm not awakening. Why is that? And there's no really good answer, except the only answer I can give is that we may need to develop this, like almost this unflinching, right? This unflinching desire to wake. I used to give even this analogy to let people know what kind of longing I'm talking about. That is, imagine that you are traveling somewhere in the Sahara Desert and you run out of water, and then in the end, all you want is water. You don't want anything. Water is the only thing that pops up in your mind. You don't want anything in this world. Your whole being, your body, your heart, your even soul, and every cell in your body will be actually totally longing for water. That's all you will care. At some point, we may need to learn how to have that kind of longing to wake up. Like they were ready to give up everything. We are ready to sacrifice our little glories we all have, our false security, at least in our consciousness, in order to wake up. That's the secret. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming here tonight. And thank you once again. And thank you for the invitation. Thank you.